New CNN reporting today there's a notable shift in how top Democrats feel about President Biden running for re-election in 2024. With the midterms fast approaching, many party leaders, operatives, and other officials are having discussions weighing whether the president should run for a second term. And CNN's Isaac Dovere joins me now. Isaac, interesting reporting here. We just heard the senator a few moments ago, Senator Tester, speaking to this, and he was saying he thinks Biden should run. It took a little pushing and prodding, but he eventually said it. But you're sort of running into some of the same kind of discussions. What are you finding out?
Yeah, discussions that are very similar to what we just heard out of Senator Tester from you. Eventually saying, yes, I hope he runs, but with this feeling of like, I'm not sure, is he going to run? No, people are not quite convinced, but they are feeling much better about the idea of him running than they were a couple months ago. Obviously, Biden's numbers are improving. There are a lot of successes that he can point to. Democrats are in a much better mood about a lot of things these days.
Gas prices are way down.
Obviously, that's a big part of it. But is this going to lead to Joe Biden, who will turn 80 this November and would turn 82 shortly after the 2024 election, deciding to run for re-election? It's a big, big question, and it really does come back to age more than anything, that people aren't quite sure he's going to do it.
But if you were to contrast what Democratic officials are saying to you now versus 6 months ago?
Oh, it's night and day, really, on that.
Yeah.
And you know, in this story, there's a part of the reporting is that at the meeting of the Democratic National Committee, these party leaders, state party chairs from all over the country, they had one in March, and they were all talking to each other. How do we get Joe Biden not to run for president? Right. Like, how do we stop this from happening? They had another one just 2 weeks ago, right outside Washington, and they were all talking about how, hey, this is great. Maybe he should run. But even that was couched in this, as one member put it to me, if he wants to run, people will support him.
Yeah.
And those comments on 60 Minutes last week that made people think that he was really undecided about it have really shaken through a lot of the Democratic Party establishment.
Yeah, it's jump-started those conversations again. All right, Isaac, we'll stay tuned on that. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. Joining us now, CNN senior political analyst John Avlon and host of PBS Firing Line, and CNN political commentator Margaret Hoover. John and Margaret, first let me get your reactions to what Isaac was just talking about a few moments ago, and we were just talking to Senator Tester about this in the previous segment, and it took a little, pushing and prodding, but he eventually got there. He hopes that Joe Biden will run, but it does sound as though the conversations that Democrats are having now around the dinner table or at the bar or whatever are a lot different than 6 months ago when gas was $5 a gallon and so on. What do you guys think?
Go ahead. I mean,
look, I think he's had a lot of objective wins, bipartisan wins, but also Democratic Party wins through Congress. Gas prices are lower. People are feeling more bullish about the midterms, but they shouldn't get over their skis on that one. Look, I think the problem is that Biden always ran, we forget this, as a candidate of someone who would get Trump out of office and then be a bridge to a new generation. Implicit was always the idea that he might very well be a one-termer. The question is who the Democrats have that's better than Joe Biden when it comes head-to-head against Donald Trump. But I think those are the expectations that are colliding right now. But certainly the calculus is a lot different than it was 6 months ago.
I'll just quickly add that to a certain degree, Jim, it doesn't actually matter what every Democrat around the kitchen table is saying. All that matters is whether Joe Biden thinks he's going to run, wants to run, and decides to run. And Joe Biden is not taking a census of the Democrats in Congress or in the Senate as he makes his decision. So I understand, just anecdotally from Democrats that I talk to that have a sense of the White House, that he's moving forward and that he doesn't intend to step aside.
Yeah. And as Isaac and I both know, because we covered this back in 2016 and 2015, this is an intensely personal decision for Joe Biden. He makes it based on what is happening in his personal life. That's what happened in 2016 when his son Beau passed away. He decided not to run. And in 2020, he saw what happened in Charlottesville and just had this very visceral reaction as he tells the story and decided, that's it, I'm running for president. And so he make a similar calculation this time around, a much more emotional one, I suppose. Let me move on to Maggie Haberman's new book about Trump. She has this book coming out. In an excerpt, she says that she heard that Trump had described Florida Governor Ron DeSantis as, quote, fat, phony, and whiny, while at the same time claiming credit for helping DeSantis become the governor. There has been sort of this simmering tension between Trump and DeSantis. It seems to bubble up from time to time. Where do you guys see all of this, and how do you see that playing out?
So I I have been wondering for some time because, as we know, any Republican who goes toe to toe with Donald Trump gets a nickname, gets branded unfavorably by Donald Trump, and that tends to stick with the base of the Republican Party. And heretofore, we had not known what Donald Trump's kind of nickname insult would be for Ron DeSantis, and we have, through Maggie's reporting, a much clearer sense of how Donald Trump would go after Ron DeSantis. Very few people, Little Marco, Tired Jeb, all these other have been able to
Lion
get out
Ted
from
was
under.
one, yeah.
Lion Ted have been able to get out from under the characterization that Donald Trump gives them. And I have long believed that it is a matter of time and that Trump is holding his fire but will wait until the perfect moment to do the same thing to Ron DeSantis that he's done to every other Republican who dares test his mettle against him. And while Ron DeSantis' stock is hot right now, especially amongst the donor class, especially among Republican political class, it strikes me that Republicans have not learned the lesson of how Donald Trump treats people who dare to go up against him.
When are Republicans going to stop tiptoeing around the schoolyard bully and realize that strong men are always weak? I mean, the degree to which everyone's afraid to take on Trump directly. Maybe DeSantis will be different. Maybe he won't. I don't know that he's actually got the charisma and the likability of people to run successfully for president. But, all the ambitious Republicans who are thinking about running for president need to understand that they are going to have to take the bully on directly. That's how you defeat the schoolyard bully. You punch back. And until any of them get some spine and some stones and realize that truth, we're going to be stuck in this ridiculous insult sandbox politics land.
Well, the only one who has, right? Liz Cheney has demonstrated that kind of mettle.
Sure.
But she
Right.
can't win a 30% base of the Republican Party. I mean, that base
Yeah.
is Donald
Well,
Trump's.
and that leads me to my next question. And she said at this Texas Tribune Festival over the weekend, she said that she will no longer be a Republican if Donald Trump becomes the nominee for the party in 2024. What did you guys think of that?
I mean, I really understand those comments on a deep visceral level. I have a hard time right now. People like me hang their hats on the Republicans who voted for conviction and have lived to tell about it, of which there are very few. We really need primary campaign reform, primary election reform, all sorts of reforms in the Republican Party in order to be able to have more diversity in the Republican Party when it comes to this question of Donald Trump and other issues. And so it's hard to imagine. I mean, we know that the party really is, the base of the party is really captured by Donald Trump. But if he's the nominee again, it's going to be very difficult to self-identify as a Republican.
I mean, look, if Republicans traditionally have been based around a sense of patriotism, fidelity to the Constitution, if they renominate someone who's tried to overturn an election, that's about the least patriotic, least faithful to the Constitution thing someone can conceivably do. And I do think that, look, there's a reason that more and more Americans are identifying as independents. But this is really a gut check for the Republican Party. And if folks, again, keep enabling this, playing this game that Mitch McConnell and other folks play, where they secretly, they know the truth, they feel strongly about it, but in public they say, well, if he gets the nomination, we'll support him. That's definitionally party over country. And that's unsustainable for a democratic republic.
And another Republican who would like to be president very badly is Senator Ted Cruz. He was also at the Texas Tribune Festival. He got into a heated exchange with some audience members while talking about school shootings. Let's take a look at that.
The single best step to stop them is have armed officers on campus that can stop them before they kill our kids. But look, instead, you guys can instead sing Kumbaya with them and hope they'll just stop. But what you're proposing doesn't work.
At the end there, we heard somebody shout, 18-year-olds do not need an AR-15. I mean, quite an emotional moment there.
Yeah, no, first of all, I watched the whole thing so that you didn't have to. And one of the, I honestly, halfway through, I stopped. I thought, Ted Cruz, the 1990s are calling you for their NRA talking points back. I mean, this is not anything new, and it doesn't look at the reality of what's happened in Texas in the last 2 months. Yeah. Look at the other senator from Texas, John Cornyn, who took to heart seriously what happened in Uvalde, joined hands with Chris Murphy, who's the senator from Newtown, Connecticut, joined hands where the other children were slaughtered at the hands of a gunman, and they passed the first bipartisan gun legislation since 1994, since the 1990s. Okay,
Yeah.
what they did was extraordinary. They get too little credit for it, but John Cornyn is actually not in bad shape in Texas, and Ted Cruz is way out of step with the electorate in Texas. You have mega Republican donors, Republican operatives who all recognize that reasonable restrictions around gun control is not an infringement of Amendment rights.
And that moment is just another example of how there's just so much emotion on this issue. And when you're dealing with people who have been impacted by a school shooting like this in a community, your heart just has to go out to them. End of story. That's the way you handle it. I mean, to get in a shouting match with somebody who's hurting over this, it just doesn't make any sense. All right, we got to go. John Avlon, Margaret Hoover. We'll get this discussion going next time. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
And we'll
Jim.
be right
Take care.
back.
Have a good
Thank you. All right, we'll be right back.